U.S. fertility rates hit another record low. I mean, you want to know why? I saved exactly why. Right here. I don't know if it'll show the U.S., but it'll show Canada eventually. Oh, is that a hard drive? Here we go. Now, need to readjust where it is so that you can see it. Now, if we look down here, we'll see this is the happiness index. And if you look at the young and you come all the way down here, you will see it's 71. So, of 150 countries, Canada is ranked 71 for youth happiness. The United States is slightly better, but 60. 60 is still bad. Like, that is still really bad. When you go to the rest, the US, let's make sure I got this right, at 18. That's like not the youth. They rate it as 18. It's your youth, the young people are supposed to be building families, having children, are horribly unhappy in your country. They're unhappy, they're not going to have kids. Like, you got to make this group happy right there, or you don't have children in your society. That simple. And I don't know why people don't seem to understand it. Like, this is not a hard thing to fix. Probably a costly thing to fix. Not hard. U.S. fertility rate hit another record low. New data shows U.S. fertility rates continue a long-term decline, driven largely by drops among teenagers. Why it matters signals potential long-term demographic and economic shifts in population and workforce dynamics. Uh, let's see. They're going through, like, you look at the chart, they're going through the exact, the US and Canada going through like the exact same issue. The youth unhappiness. If anything, it's worse. It is worse in our country. Um, let's see if we can find.
Are
Let's
falling
go.
around the world. And while this might seem like nothing new, as it's been the case in developed countries for quite some time, the number of newborns in Japan fell 5% last year, and birth rates hit record lows in England and the United States too. The thing that's interesting is that we're seeing declining birth rates everywhere, and the standard explanations that you've heard in the past don't really hold up. The first contraceptive pill was approved by the FDA in the United States in 1960. And over the next 20 years, the average number of children born to American women halved from almost 4 to 2. The pill had a major impact on society and culture. It contributed to a sharp increase in female college attendance and graduation rates. Over that 20-year period, the number of marriages only fell slightly.
So the introduction of birth control led to women more actively entering the workforce because they started having less children. Women more actively entering the workforce kind of made it a social or a societal requirement to enter the workforce, then had an even greater impact on lowering fertility. So it's a vicious cycle that was started by contraceptives.
The fertility rate, which is the expected number of children born per woman in her childbearing years, sits at 1.44 children per woman today in the UK and 1.64 children per woman today in the United States. The replacement fertility rate, which would keep the population steady, is 2.1 births per woman in the developed world, but it can be as high as 3.5 in undeveloped countries because of higher mortality rates. There are a lot of reasons given for the falling birth rates in wealthy countries, most obviously increased access to contraception, but also improved education and career opportunities for women, the rising cost of living and raising children, and changing societal values and family structures. The interesting thing, though, is that birth rates are collapsing everywhere, not just in the developed world. Tunisia, Turkey, Tamil Nadu, Guatemala, and Mexico are all
Yeah, I hear that like even North Korea is having issues with birth rates. Completely disconnected, about as disconnected from like the global environment as you can be. They're having the same problem.
experiencing similar declines. According to research from my colleague Alice Evans at King's College London, Turkey has a lower birth rate than the UK does, and Mexico has a lower
Turkey?
birth rate than the United States.
Find these. Where do I pull these up? This looks like the chart I want. Ooh. Um. Oh, this is great. Okay. Fertility rates. Ooh. That's the 1.5. We've dropped below that. Need to be above that line. This goes to 2023. There's the 2 line. So they have it's slightly higher than Canada, but like it's showing the same decline. That when they introduced contraceptives, it's been a slow decline since. It said Mexico was lower. Uh-huh. Births per woman, they're not. The US was that line. Also, not a good line. Okay, that's giving me problems. What was this one? Oh, this is the average age of mothers at childbirth. 31 in Canada. Almost 30 in the US. Oh, let's try. Google gets me the chart. Ooh, okay, images. That looks good. That also looks like fertility rates in the world's 10 biggest countries. China's is dropping again. US, Brazil, India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Nigeria. Even look at the if we have the map, the places that have high fertility rates. Ethiopia was brought up, right? They're still dropping. They're dropping massively. Like, that is a bad line. Oh, none of that's good. How is it? How is it dropping? Spot of bright red. South, South Korea, but even North Korea, like I said, going through the same thing going on. That is it. That contraceptives, when you contraceptives are widely accepted in your country, then just start plummeting. China. What? What? Like, that is a halving of your population in a generation. What's happened? Like, they leveled out here. Like, this can't just, like, contraceptives could probably cause like the crazy to more sustained around 2. But this further drop longer? No, no, no. That is insane. In Spain, the average age of a mother is 32.5. I don't think that tells us a whole lot because as technology improves, things like IVF become available and really bring up the age that you can have children. Like the average age of a first time mother, I think would be more appropriate at telling us a trend here rather than just technology doing this. More charts, birth rates. Ooh, okay. Births per 1,000 people. 9.1, 10. What is it over here? 6, 13, 8, 10. Okay. What's this one? Share of women who have given a number of births. So no births, 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4 or more. This only goes to 1973. That's not going to show me anything then. It was 1973, tell us. Like, again, like this whole thing, I personally believe it's all related to the happiness. The young, and I mean those slightly above the young, are the ones that have kids. And when their happiness sits at 71st, has declined massively, um, that's why you have low birth rates right there. Hope is probably the most important thing for people to have kids. If your happiness is declining year over year massively, you got no hope. I don't see our current administration doing anything to fix it. I'll leave you up. I like to come back to that. You can
When you look at
talking.
the factors that can be blamed, for example, the high cost of raising and educating children or working women marrying later, they don't apply in every country where fertility rates are declining. According to Alice, the initial drop in US fertility can be attributed to couples having fewer children, but in recent years, the major contributing factor is the decline of coupling. People are either pairing up later in life and thus having fewer children, or staying single and having no children.
I would like to see that graph that we were looking at, but for a more modern year, because everyone said like you need 2.1 births uh, per woman, but if there's a lot of people that are having zero, if we can get this chart.
Other explanations that you'll likely have heard are that fertility rates are dropping because women are spending more time in education, or that fertility rates fall when women focus more on their careers than they did in the past. It's often reported
I'm going to say it's pretty much all happiness.
that people just decide to have fewer children when countries become more prosperous. But according to Alice, the decline is most pronounced among societal groups with less education rather than more. Her data shows that coupling is not only declining in wealthy Western countries, but also in East Asia, Latin America, and most severely in the Middle East and North Africa. In Turkey and Tunisia, the fertility rate has fallen to 1.5 children per woman, which is a bigger problem than the 1.44 in the UK, as the replacement rate in the developing world is much higher than in the developed world because of higher mortality rates.
Okay,
In countries
that makes
with different
sense.
wealth, different cultures, different religiosity, and where people face very different problems, fertility has gotten very low and is continuing to fall. So, why should we be concerned about this? For decades, people were worrying about overpopulation. Well, from a financial perspective,
I remember that back when there were fears of like, oh, that line it's gonna shoot up and we're not gonna be able to sustain the population. And now, how that's changed.
as countries face both aging and declining populations and a smaller workforce in relation to the number of retirees, it could cause all sorts of economic problems. Charles Goodhart and Manoj Pradhan wrote a book, The Great Demographic Reversal, on the economic effects of these demographic changes and how governments and policymakers have not prepared for this issue. Longtime viewers know that I often rely on my sponsor, Ground News, in researching
Okay,
these
I can look
videos
while he
so
does
that I
this.
can gather factual information stripped of partisanship. Recently, the news broke of a new directive from the Department of Transportation prioritizing communities with higher marriage and birth rates when awarding transportation grants. You can follow this story at ground.news/PB. Former Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao instructed the DOT to weigh these factors, a move that both left and right leaning sources suggest could favor Republican majority states, which tend to have higher birth rates. A quick look shows how coverage varies across the political spectrum, with over 94% of these sources being highly factual, helping me separate reliable reporting from speculation. Taking a deeper look at the coverage, left leaning headlines emphasize concerns over government overreach and potential discrimination in federal funding, while right leaning coverage frames the policy as a pro family initiative. Ground news is particularly useful for topics like this, which have a political edge. Their app and website organizes the world's news so that you can compare coverage, track missing angles, and spot biases that might shape public perception. For a limited time, you can get the same plan I use for nearly half off. Just go to ground.news/PB or scan the QR code on screen to get the Vantage plan for just $5 a month, a small investment in making informed decisions. The situation
Okay, so that's the EU one. I found a chart over here. I'm going to go through and use chart. Okay, so Canadian fertility rates, total fertility rates, and historical events, Canada. So 3.4, the Great Depression. Yes. Argue we're in another depression, but this is what happened during the Depression. The Second World War. Actually, so great increase, and then you had the baby boom, right? All throughout here. That line. This is there's a lot of reasons for this. My understanding, the largest reason why there was a baby boom after the Second World War was aggressive taxation policy. Because of the war, the government was far more aggressive in how it taxed the citizens, and how it then distributed the taxes to, fund the war. And so there was actually, what's the word, quality, or that metric was, what do they call financial equality? What's that term? What's the term for financial equality? The metric number between 0 and 1. I'll get it for the Gini coefficient. So the Gini coefficient is how they measure value. Inequality within your society is measured through the Gini coefficient. And so inequality got significantly better throughout the war and after the war because of government more forcefully entering in, taxing, and divvying up the resources. So this increase in inequality decrease shows up as increased birth rate. So like, we know how to make the line go up. We've done it before. We know how to do it again. We are choosing not to. And so at its peak, authorization to sell the contraceptive pill to regulate the hormonal cycle. Massive decline. Decriminalization of contraception and abortion. Massive decline. And then we kind of leveled out well below the replacement rate. And then start of COVID, you see a little dip up as people were working from home. And then we continue our slide down. What's our current number? We're opening this. What's the current fertility rate in Canada, the US, and the EU? Let's see the even that other chart we were looking at, it only goes up to like 2023. So let's see what it's like in 2026. Canada 1.25. In 2024. What? Like, almost China's level. How? How is that a thing? United States approximately 1.6. I mean, that's bad, but it's, when you compare it to 1.25, they're doing great. Data shows, okay, Europe 1.34. Europe's slightly better than Canada, slightly worse than the US. That's wild. All three are well below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman needed for a stable population in the long term. These figures reflect ongoing downward trends observed in many developed countries. Canada's rate has declined sharply in recent years, and it's now in the ultra low category. I mean, like, I'll bring this up again. You can see it side by side. We do worse in youth happiness. We have lower children per woman. They do bad, but better than us in youth happiness. They have slightly higher births, fertility rate, births per woman. I mean, like, correlation, causation. I'm gonna just say there's probably a causal link here between these two factors. This is what you gotta solve if you want to solve this.
According to Pradhan and Goodhart, is that birth rates began their decline in Europe in the 1950s and have gotten worse since then. The low birth rates, combined with the extension in lifespans that we've seen in developed countries, have meant a rapid decrease in the ratio of people in the labour force to people over the age of 65. This ratio has already reached levels where the fiscal sustainability of the social contract of financing healthcare and pensions has come under threat, but this ratio will continue to decline in the future. According to Lant Pritchett at the London School of Economics, if no migration occurs by 2050, Italy will have 0.88 people in the labour force for everyone over the age of 65. No
0.88.
have 0.88 people continue to decline in the future. According to Lant Pritchett at the London School of Economics, if no migration occurs by 2050, Italy will have 0.88 people in the labour force for everyone over the age of 65. No economy in history has ever had dependency ratios that high. In the post-war period, when European social
That's insane.
programs were introduced, there were 8 workers for every retiree. Pritchett points out that because the elderly require a lot of care, there simply won't be enough workers to do that work in the near future. He says that if you want to maintain the support ratio of workers to those over the age of 65 at its current level, the rich world would need to import 450 million workers in the next 25 years. Japan currently has the lowest ratio of workers to retirees, with 1.83 workers per person over the age of 65. Jesus Fernandez Villaverde from the University of Pennsylvania analyzed the GDP of advanced economies per working age adult instead of growth per capita, and found that Japan is a surprisingly productive economy once demographics are taken into account. Since the global financial crisis, he found that Japan has the highest growth rate in output per working age adult in the countries he studied at 1.49%, surpassing the US.
So, Japan's economy has been historically stagnant. And what they're saying is that it hasn't been stagnant. There's actually been significant growth in productivity within the country. The working population has been shrinking. And that is why you see stagnation. Like Canada has an opposite problem. We bring in so many immigrants that our country looks like it grows a bit. But that's because we are adding people to produce more things to the economy. And is losing people. They show stagnation. So the loss of people is actually hiding the growth. Whereas in Canada, adding of people is hiding the stagnation.
US growth rate of 1.34%, but The problem is the country's terrible demographics. Based on his research, this is the cause of Japan's malaise. Unfortunately, without migration, every rich country in the world will have a lower ratio of workers to retirees by 2050 than Japan has today. This isn't really based on projections either. 2050 is just around the corner, and most of the people who will be of working age by 2050 have already been born today. You might think that the solution is just for people to extend their working lives. After all, if we're living longer and we're healthier than ever before, maybe we can work.
That is done in certain places. Um, I think it's Denmark. They peg retirement age to standard the average life expectancy, so that if life expectancy increases, retirement age increases. Certain number of years of retirement. Um, that's a far more sustainable way of doing it than what we're doing now, because I think we're going to start to see personally significant increases in longevity, um, just because of the exponential increase in technology that we're seeing now in like AI. I think that will translate over into longer lives. So it not increasing your retirement age. Like you saw France try and do that, and there's basically near rebellion level protests try to increase their retirement age by a couple of years. And that, I mean, their retirement system is threatening to bankrupt their country. You see that in Canada too, although France, I think, is further along in that cycle.
Into our 70s. While this might be necessary, it would be very difficult from a political perspective. In 2022, the French president announced that
Oh,
he
he's going
would
to talk about it.
gradually raise the retirement age from 62 to 65. Retirement age would be extended by 3 months per year from September 2023 to September 2030. This led to massive demonstrations and strikes. Raising the retirement age in the developed world wouldn't help very much anyway, as according to Pritchett's analysis, there's aging amongst the aged. Most of the people over 65 are well over 65. A lot of the growth in the population is people in their 80s and 90s. Pradhan and Goodhart argue in their book that the demographic changes that are occurring will have massive economic effects. They point out that while global inequality has declined over the last 30 or so years, within country inequality has increased. This increase in inequality in the developed world has led to the rise of populist leaders who promise to fix it. Pradhan and Goodhart say that this inequality dynamic is mostly explained by a shock in the supply of labor brought about by globalization. They say that we've already reached peak globalization a few years ago, as there was nowhere else to go to build factories staffed by cheaper labor. They argue that globalization over the last 30 years or so was deflationary, as while working wages didn't rise in the developed world, the cost of goods that we consume fell in price and increased in quality for the price we pay. They point out, much like Lamp Pritchett does, that the services required by the elderly can't be shipped in from abroad the way clothing and electronics can, as the consumption of Western consumers.
I mean, we're going to try. They the whole visa program in the US, a lot of that, I mean, the whole visa program in Canada, a lot of that is bringing in lower aged labor. And a lot of that is to serve the elderly. They're going to give it a shot, as horrible as that'll be for the economy.
Switches from physical goods towards healthcare and personal services, they argue that the deflationary effects of globalization will reverse. On top of this, as the supply.
The deflationary effects of globalization. So globalization has the effect. I heard that globalization has a deflationary effect on the economy. How does that work? Globalization boosts competitive, driving prices down. That makes sense. So he's saying that the deflationary aspect of globalization will stop. Does that is that going to be a larger inflation then? Globalization exerts deflationary, or more precisely, disinflationary effects on economies primarily by increasing the supply of goods and services at lower cost, intensifying competition and moderating wages and price pressure. This doesn't typically cause outright deflation, but it has contributed to persistent low inflation in advanced economies for decades, especially from the 1990s through the 2010s. Economists at the institutions like the IMF, ECB, and Federal Reserve have documented this as one reason inflation stayed below target despite monetary stimulus. We're not going to go into how it works.
Of workers falls, their bargaining power in wage negotiations will grow. We're already seeing shortages of labour in the developed world, and as the working age population declines and the consumption basket changes, this can be expected to become more of a problem, especially if immigration restrictions.
So if deflationary pressures disappear, start to see inflation. To combat inflation, you have to raise interest, which means globalization gives you lower interest rates. And the deflationary pressures that we see are going to go away because you can't keep expanding it anymore. And so you're likely to see higher interest rates.
Stay in place or grow. Goodhart and Pradhan expect to see a decline in inequality in the developed world, but unless there's a major productivity boost, they say that we can expect to see reduced output and suffer many of the problems seen in Japan today. These economists have a very different worldview to the Silicon Valley visionaries who are telling us that AI breakthroughs will cause mass unemployment in the near future. Alice Evans points out that South Indian states have seen a collapse in fertility equivalent to in Western countries. Tamil Nadu has the lowest fertility rate at 1.4, but in Tamil Nadu, only 29% of women work outside the home. This means that the average man will be supporting himself, his wife, and kids, along with two sets of elderly parents. This is quite a burden for one wage earner
That's impossible, one wage earner.
who also has to presumably prepare for his own retirement. Goodhart and Pradhan point out that as society ages, we can expect to see retirees spend down the savings that they've accumulated during their working lives. They argue that this should push up interest rates in the coming years. They argue that retirement ages will have to increase and tax rates will have to go up to pay for senior benefits. They say that if tax rates stay the same, the expectation is then that there'll be lower payouts for retirees. They say that lower retiree benefits might incentivize the working age population to save more for retirement as they see the social safety net failing. So, what's causing this fertility decline all over the world?
That if the younger generation sees the social safety net failing, they'll cut back their spending. What that'll do is that'll shrink the economy, and that'll cause a lot more issues. So, like, that's just another step that's going to happen in this chain. if we allow it to play out.
According to Alice Evans, and I'll put a link to her blog in the description as it's a really fascinating read, it can't be explained by many of the factors that we've heard in the past, as it's happening all over and in parts of the world where those factors don't apply. She argues that the decline in birth rates around the world is not driven by the decisions made by couples to have fewer children, but from a decline in the number of couples. She says that had US marriage rates and cohabitation rates remained constant over the last decade, America's total fertility rate would actually be higher today than it was in the past. The issue is not declining rates of childbearing.
So it's those apps that those ones that people are always complaining about. The relationship app. Those are literally failing at their job. I mean, it makes sense. They make money by keeping people single, right? Because you got to pay for them or whatever. So they're succeeding at their job, but their job is to keep single. That that's dystopian.
But declining rates of coupling. Some have put forth that this could be driven by women outpacing men in college enrollment and graduation, and that maybe they're refusing to pair up with less successful men. The thing is that we see this decline in fertility rates in the Middle East and North Africa, where female educational attainment is lower than male educational attainment. One of the few places where fertility rates have not declined is in North India, and in North India, the ratio of male to female university enrollment is the same as in the United States, where more women enroll in universities and more women graduate.
Really? So educated women is not the problem. Or if it is part of the problem, it's a tiny part of the problem. I mean, like, my keep repeating this till I'm blue in the face. This is what I think the problem is. Hard drive goes to sleep on. The happiness index. People need hope for the future to have children. And if you're not giving hope for the future, they're not gonna have kids. It's pretty simple. Apparently, educated women low to no impact. Now let's see what he's got to say.
Well, is it that women have been more economically successful in recent decades and they just don't need a man to support them? That doesn't seem to be the case either. South Korea has the largest gender pay gap in the OECD, but South Korean women are still choosing to go it alone.
I thought it was a problem here. No, no, we're getting modern numbers. Can you give me up-to-date numbers for the fertility rates of South Korea, Japan, and China? If you think too long, I'm going to a different AI. Can you give me up-to-date numbers for the fertility rates of South Korea, Japan, and China? Okay, the most recent data for 24-25 shows that all three countries are continuing to experience historic lows in their total fertility. Let's go down to the numbers. Hey, the South Korean one went up a little bit. Okay. I mean, still a bigger problem there than here, but it did increase slightly. China, continue the downslide. Japan, consistent. I mean, our number, Canada isn't much bigger than this, but we're like 1.26 or something. We're pretty much there. The only difference is here we have a lot of immigration, which is why, I mean, to be fair, our population didn't grow recently, it's declining slightly.
And have a fertility rate half that of the United States. Is it the cost of living or the cost of educating a young child? After all, I have
There's a
friends
lot
who
of
tell me
costs.
that they couldn't have another child because of how expensive private schools have become. This might explain lower birth rates in expensive cities, but it doesn't hold.
I mean, one of the factors is definitely that in an agrarian economy, your children are a productive factor. Make you money or make you more product. As soon as you transition to like a more developed economy, child goes from someone that produces to someone that consumes from the budget. Obviously, all children will consume from the budget while they're young, really young, but then children tend to produce. You're out there on a farm, and then city they do not. And price of children, like cost of raising them, it's only skyrocket. So that's definitely a factor. I think it's a factor that is reflected here. Cost of living, cost of childcare. That'll all show up on how the youth about happiness, about their future.
In the Middle East and North Africa. And when we look at a list of the least expensive countries to raise a family, we can see that they all have declining fertility rates too. To be clear, I'm not saying that the cost of living crisis is not a problem, just that it's not the primary cause of declining birth rates. Surveys of parent attitudes show that the cost of living is on their list, but it's rarely near the top. And there are large parts
How long is the list? Like this sounds like a horrible list.
of the world where the cost of living has not exploded, and in those places, people are not coupling up and birth rates are in decline. It's often claimed that young, wealthy people are waiting longer to couple up and have children as they're having fun and spending their income on themselves. But the numbers show that the drop in relationship formation is steepest amongst the poorest in society. So it's not about wealth. The trend is global.
Doesn't that mean it's exactly about wealth? Let's hear that again.
In decline. It's often claimed that young, wealthy people are waiting longer to couple up and have children as they're having fun and spending their income on themselves. But the numbers show that the drop in relationship formation is steepest amongst the poorest in society.
So it's about wealth. Like if your drop is steepest among the poorest in society, that means it's 100% about wealth. Like if they weren't poor, the drop wouldn't be so bad, right? Like that makes sense to me. You have money, everything's easier.
So it's not about wealth. The trend is global. According to Alice, around the world, falling birth rates are increasingly driven by a relationship recession amongst young adults, which leads us to the question, have humans become like pandas who just refuse to reproduce? Now, it's long been my
Humans do not reproduce in captivity.
opinion, though I've done no research on this, that the reason pandas don't breed in captivity is that zookeepers keep feeding them bamboo. And let's be serious, that's not going to be easy to digest, and the zookeeper wouldn't be in the mood either if he'd eaten a 2x4 for lunch. One of the interesting things that Alice Evans has found is that in countries all over the world, a wide political gap has opened up between young men and young women.
Before we get into this, um, oh gosh, what was that point? It disappeared as soon as it formed. Ah, give me a second. Let's see. Because I wanted to say it earlier too. Well, it'll come back again at some
John
point.
Byrne Murdoch covered this a few months ago in the FT, where he writes that tens of millions of young people who occupy the same cities, workplaces, classrooms, and even homes no longer see eye to eye politically. In the US, Gallup data shows that after decades where the sexes were each spread roughly equally across liberal and conservative worldviews, women aged 18 to 30
Really? Look at that shift. Holy. I mean, I'm looking at South Korea. Men, I mean, these are hard metrics to measure, right? You you want to know all the problems in the UK? They both went liberal around like 2012. They both shifted liberal. That's why they got so many issues there. Like you gotta normalize that line back down to here, buddy, or you're gonna keep having some horrible issues in your country. Oh, I mean, in the US and Canada, usually follows the US pretty closely. So men were actually more liberal than conservatives way back in the day, 1980. Men haven't changed that much. Women have taken a strong turn liberal. I don't get it because I don't like breaking things down, liberal and conservative. I look at ideas and weight ideas not where it falls on a political spectrum. I can agree with Mark Carney on things, and I can disagree with Mark Carney. I really dislike how he is hiding immigration statistics, how he has not decreased immigration, despite kind of pushing forward and showing that he's trying to decrease immigration, and that he hasn't actually decreased it. So I can dislike that at the same time as I like that he's going out trying to diversify the economy, find new trading partners. That is something I support. I don't know, liberal and conservative. It's a hard metric to like understand. What is considered liberal? What is considered conservative? I don't know what we can really determine from this, other than that, in ideas, people are, however they measure these ideas, women and men are getting further apart. And if you got to spend your entire life with someone, it's hard to do that if all their ideas are completely different than yours.
Are now 30 percentage points more liberal than their male contemporaries, and possibly more surprisingly, that gap took just 6 years to open up. German data and British data also show a similar gap between increasingly conservative young men and progressive young women. He writes that in Poland last year, almost half of men aged 18 to 21 backed the hard right Confederation Party, compared to just a sixth.
We're gonna see this more and more, where these extreme parties take on a bigger and bigger role. And this is for a lot of reasons. But at the core of it, I think it's all economics. People want to find a solution to their economic problem. Honestly, I don't think any of them are offering, like, none of them seem to be offering a solution that I think will work. But I mean, they take a more radical stance, and that gets them more support.
Of young women of the same age. Similar political divisions can be seen all over the world, where studies show that the political divide between genders has grown massively for those under the age of 30, while older age groups remain evenly matched. And the political division between the genders is particularly wide in China and South Korea.
So is this social media then? That is getting people to fall into like these groups. Get it? And essentially like fall into a group, and then you accept their ideology, kind of like without question, and you're radicalized. Is that what we see happening? I don't know, because when I was earlier, I was looking at X, and I noticed a lot of the top posts were from Fox News or Trump's statement. Very, it did a good job at like getting the data, but it was all leaning in like a specific direction. Didn't really show it, like it didn't show another perspective on it. I feel. I don't know. I'm gonna keep using X because at least the comment section there is pretty good. I guess I'll have to keep using that and seeing. But I do feel like it was trying to push a specific viewpoint, which I don't like. I like neutral reporting, possible.
While studies show that young men have become more conservative and young women more liberal, that doesn't mean that falling fertility is due to a shift in women's preferences. Alice writes in her blog that while right and left both assume that men would love to have more kids, but fertility is being dragged down by women, surveys show that women have a greater preference for having children than men. It is possible that politics is having the same effect on young people as a high fiber diet is having on pandas. An interesting fact is that in the United States, while the overall fertility rate has fallen, women over the age of 30 are having more children than they did in the 1990s. It's only younger women who are having fewer children, and even that decline is concentrated.
Percent change 1990 to 2022, the 15 to 19 range, massive decrease in percent change. 2024, massive decrease. 25 to 29, large decrease. And in like the 35 to 39, it's a huge increase. I mean, if you didn't have kids here, right? If you have kids here, then you don't want kids here because you've had your children growing up, they're moving out or but if you don't have them here and you want kids, then you have to have them live, which is what we see. But doing this is causing an overall decrease.
Amongst teenagers, where teenage pregnancy has almost entirely disappeared in the developed world. There are some positives associated with waiting longer to have children. According to The Economist, each year a woman goes without having a child, her expected lifetime earnings increases. A woman who has her first child in her 30s can be expected to earn more than twice what she would have.
I mean, like, it all comes back to money in the end, doesn't it? The economic situation, inequality, stuff like that. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I think this whole thing could be solved. The UBI, universal basic income. Like, I think most of the issues that we hear about could be solved with a UBI. I think this issue could be solved with a universal basic income. I think it's inevitable that we're going to need something like the sooner we start pushing for something like that, the better.
Earned had she had her first child aged 22. While most politicians and policymakers are ignoring their country's demographic problems, some countries are offering to pay
Like a good politician should, just ignore your country's problems. Try and get out with as little impact to yourself as possible and collect your juicy retirement package. But all the politicians try and do, why we don't have a UBI.
their citizens to have children. The Economist writes that working class women's fertility is more responsive to financial circumstances than that of their richer peers. Zhejiang, a province in China, is offering newly married couples a lump sum, but only if the bride is below the age of 25. In Russia, women who have a child before they turn 25 will soon be exempt from income tax. Hungary offers a similar benefit to mothers who have their first child before 30. The reason that these incentives are being offered to young women is that women who start having children young tend to have more children over their lifetime. According to Alice Evans, while these baby bonuses may be well meaning, they are putting the cart before the horse when a growing share of young people are without a partner to begin with. So, what is the driving factor then? Why are we seeing a worldwide decline in coupling, political division between young men and women, and why are young people staying at home rather than meeting up with each other all at once all over the world? The last two questions there possibly gave you a hint to the answer to the question. The huge change that took place in recent years all over the world that changed how people interact with each other and changed the media they consume was the proliferation of smartphones and social media. According
Like it's not just that. I think COVID crit humanity in a way that we don't fully understand. I think it destroyed so many connections that people had that, oh, we'll go out and do this, and then you just didn't do it for so long. Then it didn't start up again once COVID was gone. Uh, it's done, I'd say, near irreparable damage to the human race. And now that's going to be tough to fix.
According to Alice's research, geographical differences in the decline of coupling amongst the young broadly track mobile internet usage.
I mean that doesn't help because when you lose that in-person connection because of like COVID or something, that is replaced by like an internet connection, and the in-person connection doesn't come back, and that just means you meet less people.
John Byrne Murdoch writes in the FT that this is consistent with research showing that social media usage has driven the spread of liberal values worldwide, mostly amongst women.
I'm not a woman, obviously, so I don't really notice that, but I do I do feel like there are liberal values that they like try and guilt trip you to having, or like kind of like cry bullying. They like try and treat you as a bad person if you don't have a specific value. That's just, I am someone who focuses on logic, will not be able to convince me of something stupid. If it doesn't make logical sense, I will not believe it. If I can't chat GPT it, rock the answer, get a logical answer, then it's just, I don't understand those people.
One of the few parts of the world where marriage rates have stayed high is South Asia. Alice writes that in South Asia, caste and kinship networks are secured through marriage, which remain vital for status and social inclusion. Young women are constantly being asked by their relatives, when are you getting married? This chart shows that not only is
Percentage of people in low and middle income countries who use mobile internet by sex, women and men. So South Asia, women use it significantly less. Does that mean South Asia has better? Parts somewhere in South Asia? I mean, they're at like 2.1. That like better rates, not significant. Ooh, Thailand's having the same issue as we are. They're pretty much at Canadian level.
mobile internet usage lower in South Asia than in the rest of the world, but on top of that, the gap between male and female internet usage is particularly wide. According to Pew Research, 46% of American teens say that they use the internet almost constantly.
Nearly half of teens now say they use it almost constantly. Okay, so that is in the past, 24%. What's the blue several times a day? Oh, I mean, I'm in the dark blue myself, but teens 13 to 17. I mean, is this why we see the whole push to get cell phones out of school and to get teens off of social media? Like I remember hearing that today kids are technically like intellectually behind where kids were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And it's largely thought because of the connectivity and social media and stuff like
up from 24% of teenagers who said the same a decade ago. Young men and women watch different content and report that they would often prefer to stay at home on social media or playing video games rather than going out and spending
that. Based. I mean, games are great and they cost a low amount of money. I mean, I think it comes back to economics. The fact is, being at home on the internet is a lot cheaper. Trying to go out for a meal with people, something. Finances are an incentive, and when people's finances are squeezed, follow the incentives.
time with friends. 40 years ago, Neil Postman wrote the book Amusing Ourselves to Death. The idea behind the book came from a talk Postman gave on George Orwell's book 1984. In his talk, he argued that the contemporary world in the mid 1980s was better reflected by Aldous Huxley's Brave New World rather than by George Orwell's 1984. In Brave New World, the public were oppressed by their addiction to amusement rather than state violence. Postman saw television's entertainment value in the 1980s as being equivalent to the fictitious drug Soma in Brave New World, which citizens took, exchanging their rights for entertainment. At least in the 1980s, we didn't carry our televisions around with us wherever we went. I'm sometimes amazed when I see young people out with their friends, all staring at their phones rather than talking to each other, or more
Yeah, like we didn't have that. And even when I was going,
their friends, all staring
you're in a group, but you're all on your phone. Like that apparently hasn't had good effects on people.
at their phones rather than talking to each other, or more worried about photographing their food at a restaurant for social media than enjoying it.
I mean, I've done that like once or twice. If I cook a nice meal, I'll put it on a group chat or something. But not regularly in any way, nor do I have any desire to go to a restaurant and take a picture of the food that I get. Like, none at all.
About 10 years ago, my friend Adam Robertson was using Google to try to work out what people were trying to learn on the internet. He typed in the search term, "How can I learn?" and then allowed Google to autofill the rest of the question. He wanted to see the list of Google suggested searches. The top responses were mostly languages. I did a similar check right before making this video.
Mm, what was it? How can I learn? Let's do it. Do that. I like that. Ooh, AI. AI is coming way up. How can I learn? Hey, how can I learn French, Spanish, and trading? So there's still a lot of languages, but AI is taking over.
And the top search was how can I learn AI and
Mhm.
then Python, but after that a few languages. But the thing that really shocked Adam at the time was the number 5 suggestion was how can I learn to love myself. Because these suggestions are customized to the user, Adam wondered if this suggested search term was just for him, and so he texted some friends and asked them to follow the same steps. He found that while the order of suggestions shifted around a bit, almost everyone
Did
had that
that show up? How can I learn? Like it does. I think it absolutely adjusts it for you because my IP address would show Canada. So the first one was how would I learn French? There's no way that's the top one, right? France is a huge country, but like how can I learn English is likely something far more searched globally. How can I learn Spanish is probably far more popular in the US. And then there's one that directly how to learn French for free in Canada directly says the country. So these are absolutely tailored to where you are in the world. But there doesn't seem to be any customization beyond that. Like when you talk with an AI like Grok or ChatGPT, um, it learns more about you and it'll start adding in stuff. Like whenever I ask something political, I think it is ChatGPT relates it back to Alberta, where I live. Okay.
that question in the top 5 of their suggested searches. So, why did he find this so interesting? Well, all of the other search engines, he points out, were about classes and were things that you could ask a friend. But he noted the shame embedded in that search term. He was also shocked that so many people were searching it that it was being algorithmically suggested. He felt that it was a terrifying glimpse into the loneliness epidemic all around us.
I mean, more than that, like it's a terrifying glimpse into the unhappiness epidemic that we're seeing.
A recent paper in Nature magazine shows the importance of social connections, not just for happiness, but also for health. The researchers found that while being educated, employed, wealthy, and physically active are all amongst the most life extending factors, living with a partner is almost as beneficial in terms of longevity as exercise is.
Really?
The researchers found that regular visits with family or having
I mean, like, isn't the divorce rate like 60% or something? What is the current divorce rate in Canada and the US? Okay. The most recent detailed nationwide statistics Canada divorce rate 5.6 divorces per 1,000 married person, the lowest rate in over 50 years. What's the percentage? Lifetimers in Canada, roughly, okay, that's much lower than I've heard. 38 to 47%. US, pretty much the same. 40 to 45%. Higher rates for second. That's probably where I've heard 60. But that's not the rate. It's 45, 40 to 45%. Yeah, so like somewhere around 42, 43%. I mean that's not bad. It's not great, but no 60% what I was thinking. I hear what you said again.
regular visits with family or having someone to confide in appeared to lower mortality rates. A paper by Platt and Sterling argues that social isolation has led to an epidemic of despair that's driving down fertility rates worldwide. They pointed to a catastrophic rise in anxiety, depression, and obesity related diseases that correspond with the rise of digital culture, where people are interacting with screens more than with each other. The problems, they say, are worse amongst teenage girls who are reporting high rates of depression and a desire to end it all.
Suicide rates increased 37%, decreased 5% between our rates return to the peak. Average adjusted rates per 100,000 people. I mean, that's not a good trajectory, but we are going from like 10 to 14. So a 37% increase of a small number, like it's not a massive number, but it ain't good. Ideally, you'd want that going down.
The real takeaway from this video is to put down your phone and get out there in the world and interact with real people. If you can't do that, well, you should check out our sponsor, Ground News, so that you don't become politically polarized on social media. And I suppose you could watch this video next. But seriously, go out and have some fun. Bye.
Okay. I can post that. Chat. Should see it 3 times. Great. Well, that was really good. His videos tend to be longer format, so watching them on stream when I keep, when I keep pausing and talking takes forever. That was over an hour, but I think he brings up a lot of good points. Summarized it quite well. A lot of factors that like he ruled out some stuff too in there. I personally think a lot of this, like, connectivity is an issue. From meeting people in real life to meeting people online, there is going to be a connectivity issue there. I don't think there's any stopping that. Like, the internet, I believe, is only going to become more and more ingrained in its life future. And so, like, you have to counter that other factor. And one of the biggest factor that's currently going down is like the economic situation. Most people are seeing their economic futures in negative light. And I think if you could get them to see the economic future in a positive light, you'd see an increase in birth rate. They don't appear to be doing that. So I don't know what their strategy is to fix this, but it's not working.